Welcome to A Place for Film, the IU Cinema podcast. On this week's episode, we're talking Prometheus. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Andy Hunsucker.
And I'm Jason Thompson.
And this week we're going to talk about Prometheus. And it felt appropriate since we've been talking about this movie for 2 months at least. I think every episode we've mentioned it at least one time. But we've got our old pal, Chelsey McKrill.
Hello.
So she's going to help us talk about this film. We saw it last night, and I think we've got a lot to say. So let's get into our main topic, which is Prometheus. This is, I think you and I both said this was one of our most anticipated movies of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided last week that we were going to both watch it and then talk about it this week.
Sure.
So just fair warning, we're not going to worry about spoilers. Now, I don't think we're going to give like a plot-by-plot point summary or anything like that, but we're not
Things will be revealed.
Yes, things will be revealed. So maybe this episode isn't for you. Normally, I think you should listen to every episode of the podcast. But if you haven't seen Prometheus, maybe take a week off or come back to it after you've seen Prometheus.
Yeah.
Now, Chelsey and I saw it in 3D. I know you didn't see it in 3D.
I did not.
I didn't think the 3D was anything particularly spectacular.
Yeah, I think they were very conservative with it, and I think that's pretty normal for when you actually shoot with stereo cameras, is they keep a shorter interaxial. They keep the cameras closer together, so it's not like a huge effect that comes out of the screen of you. And I didn't see any kind of like effects that things jumping out.
No.
I think the coolest thing was the fog. When it was kind of foggy, it kind of had a neat effect, but other than that, it wasn't huge.
Yeah, I thought it was competently done. I didn't walk out with a headache.
Yeah.
I didn't have to look away at all, but there wasn't anything special about the 3D. So, okay, so let's start with you, Jason. So you clearly did not like this movie. Or you had major problems with it.
I was very disappointed with it, and I had some major issues with it. I came up with a phrase. I came up with 2 things I'd like to say about it to sum it up if you're still watching.
Yes.
These are not spoilers. The movie is convenient and safe.
Sure.
And the editing is atrocious.
Yes.
This is some of the worst editing I've seen in a really long time, and that's for any movie.
Yeah.
It is paced so poorly.
Yeah.
So poorly.
Yes.
And I can get into that in a little bit, but that's just sort of even while I was sitting watching the movie, I thought there is something completely off about this movie. I don't know what it is. And then, of course, after the fact, you come to find out that there will be a longer version coming to DVD.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
That's just what Ridley Scott does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so things happen in the movie, and it's like, oh, that's awfully convenient.
Yeah.
And then there's these strings that they start pulling, and then nothing happens to them, and it's just like, why didn't you go with that?
Yeah.
That was a very interesting way of going.
Yeah. My problem with I think my problems with the movie stem entirely from the script and specifically the characterizations. There was one character in the film that I would care to see any more information about. Well, frankly, I'd like to see more information about all the characters because I didn't get any information about the characters. I really liked David, the android. I thought Fassbender was brilliant.
Yep.
He was the only one with character points. All of the others were like, I'm going to say my character point to you now, and then I'm going to make one reference to it later on. And that's it. There's the scene where Idris Elba is playing, who plays the captain in the film. He was on The Wire, Stringer Bell. Yeah. He's amazing. And he's a great actor. But it's like he's sitting there on the bridge and he's got an accordion.
Tiny accordion.
Yes. Yeah. That's his character point. And he likes Stephen Stills. The only things I knew about him for the entire movie were he's a fan of Stephen Stills and he thinks Charlize Theron's character was hot.
And a robot.
Yes.
Or at least he was asking her if that was the case.
Now I can found out it wasn't. But
I can totally relate to him thinking Stephen Stills is cool and Charlize Theron is hot, but that does not a character make.
Sure.
You know?
Well, and this is what I started thinking, because, by the way, this is totally, well, we can get into this in a minute, the whole, is it a prequel, is it not? But it is, but isn't, and I can explain why.
Yeah.
But the thing is with all these other movies from this universe, the Alien universe, because that's where it is, you care about the characters.
Yes.
And honestly, when you start boiling down the first and second movie, there isn't a ton of characterization. It's just the way it's executed.
Yeah.
It's just the way the time, the amount of time you spend with these people.
Yeah.
Where it's cut completely short in this movie, because it does start out real slow and real brooding, but then all of a sudden things just start happening, and it's just like that's not an alien film. An alien film takes its time, and then in the last 20 minutes of the film, you're just like barely holding on.
Yeah.
You understand why these characters are doing the things they're doing because of the information you've learned about them beforehand.
Yeah, and
that was my biggest problem, is the believability. It was like, these are not scientists. Like, they are not acting like scientists. They are acting like high school students.
Yeah.
Like, they're on this amazing mission, but they just don't seem to care about it at all.
I have a theory about that. I think, okay, so I'm talking specifically about the two scientists who were left behind.
Right.
So there's a sequence
when everyone else was having sex.
Yes, if you haven't seen it and are still watching, there's a sequence where these two scientists get left behind because there's a dust storm or whatever, and they can't get rescued until the morning.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
That's a pretty. I'm sorry. That's a
big deal.
Pretty big
And
deal.
everyone goes and has sex.
Yes. One of them is a geologist, one of them is a biologist, and so they decide, they're talking about how scared they are and how much they hate this, but they decide to just walk around this facility that they assume is haunted or something, but they're just wandering around.
Yeah, they're the only two characters that really feel like there's something going on in there, and yet they're the ones that are just like,
we don't need to set up.
And when he finds the little alien creature come out of the goo, he approaches it like it's his puppy dog that he's played with since he was a kid.
Yeah.
What?
My theory about this is that at some point there was a rewrite and they just changed their job descriptions to biologist and geologist, and they didn't bother to change anything else. So maybe they were soldiers at one point or maintenance workers at some point, because that's kind of what they acted. They acted like the two maintenance workers in the original Alien with Harry Dean Stanton and Yaphet Kotto. That's what they acted like. They acted like, you know what? We're just here. We're doing our thing. We don't have any specific job responsibilities. We're just here to do what.
And the other really interesting thing I thought is that, okay, so basically the premise of the movie is they find these sort of maps to this planet, and it's an invitation. So they go there, and this huge corporation, which is fueled by, what is it, Hayward or?
The Wayland.
Wayland, that's right, Wayland.
In the Alien movies, it's Wayland-Yutani. So apparently there was a merger at some point.
Right. So
that's realistic.
So, that we find out that is fueled by a huge amount of money for this one particular character played by Guy Pearce, which it was completely underused, but that's just a whole nother thing. And they get to the planet, and they're there to explore. The first thing I do when I get on a planet that I've never been on is just run out of the vehicle and just run into a cave.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
And then take off my helmet and leave it there.
Yeah.
That I almost was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because they're just like, they're not. I understand that it's, what was it, like 60, 70 years into the future?
Yeah.
So they, okay, maybe technology will tell you all the things you need to know before you even land on the planet. I mean, come on, it's another planet. It's not like this is not a groundbreaking thing that you might want to land and then maybe let, things settle down a little bit before you just get into your little, ATV and just jump on the soil and then jump into a giant beehive was what it looked like. It's like, are you insane?
Yeah.
And then of course all this other stuff starts going down, and they're like, we'll just keep following, keep going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
No, you approach with caution. You want to know why you're here. You're not just like, I demand answers.
Yeah.
You don't go into this situation like that, and that's what just drove me absolutely crazy.
One thing I found really interesting was this movie has a structure very similar to the original Alien, except that all of the characters act in completely stupid ways.
Right.
So in the original Alien, Ripley, at a certain point when the facehugger's attached to the guy and the guy comes back on, she's basically like, no, I am not letting this guy back on. Quarantine procedures say he cannot come back on. And then someone basically hits the button anyways and overrules her. In this movie, she shows up, sort of something very, very similar happens. They've all been exposed to this toxin, and there's two scenes like that, but except one, they've already been exposed to this toxin. They're like, let's just come on back in. No problem.
Right.
And then the other one, the guy's actively freaking out.
Sure.
And so Charlize Theron opens the door wide open with a flamethrower.
Right.
And it's like, that's your solution?
A flamethrower.
Maybe that was in her contract.
Yeah.
I have to open the door with a flamethrower.
And you know what? Here's the other thing about this movie. I think the script was terrible, but they thought, you know what, we've got really good actors. And they did. They'd had really, really good actors.
They did.
And they thought, our really good actors will save this movie. And they didn't, because they didn't have anything to work with.
Right. And that was part of that one scene was a part of the editing that I just thought was awful, because basically she lights this guy on fire and then just stands there as he just like dies, and then sort of fade to white, and then you're like to the next scene like instantly, and it's just like, no, let that sit
Sink
for a
in.
while.
And then they don't tell us what happened.
Like come out. Yeah, exactly.
They don't tell us what happened to that character, and then he comes back later on. It's like, was he just sitting out there the whole time? Did you not bother to bury him or put him in stasis or something?
Yeah.
You don't want to give him a burial of some kind or anything? There's no scene where we say, here's what happened to that guy we just lit on fire.
Yeah, because they're not actively involved in like a battle with any other creature or anything like that.
It's
they're
only
just
her like fiance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was like, as soon as I saw that, like, oh, fade to white, and then she's just like close up of her face, like the next, and it's just like, wait, and then there's no explanation of what happened. They're just like, oh, you're pregnant, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a weird
what?
jump.
That was such a bizarre sequence so she gets pregnant, and then she says, you know, you have to get this thing out of me. And he basically just says, oh, it's not a normal pregnancy. And so we see this like big blob of something in her womb, but we don't know what it is. We don't see anything about it, you know, and the movie just kind of skips over it like, yeah, well, it's a thing. You know what it is, audience. You know what it means. And it's like, do we? Like, are we supposed to? This is like supposed to be a different movie, right? So do we know? Yeah. It's almost like they used a shorthand that didn't exist. You know, they hadn't established. But that sequence gets even more bizarre because they're like going to put her into stasis so they can keep her on ice essentially until they get back. She escapes. Because
they killed somebody who had something going on, but now they'll keep somebody on the ship that has something inside them.
Yes.
Because that makes sense.
Yes. That is, you know, by, you know.
Although that did make a little bit of sense because it did seem like David had some sort of other, you know,
that at
priority.
least made sense. But she runs through the ship for like 2 minutes. No one tries to stop her. Gets to this surgery machine, is able to perform surgery on herself and get the thing out, and then get out of the thing and like trap it and walk back into the room. And everyone's like, hey, how you doing?
Right.
Yeah.
How you doing? No problem with security, no issues. No one even thought about, oh, you got that big scar there. That's cool. And it's like, what happened? For a second, I thought that must have been a dream sequence. Maybe the whole movie up to this point is a dream sequence because there's no explanation of what has just happened in this movie. That was so bizarre.
It was. I thought they could never decide on David and Dr. Shaw's relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, you know, they were sort of nice to each other in the beginning when everyone else was very rude to him because he was an android. She was very nice to him. And I was like, oh, maybe they'll come back. You know, at the end of the movie, he'll like save her, do something. And then it was just this very kind of odd back and forth between them.
Yeah.
The way they modeled him sort of after the Peter O'Toole character.
So brilliant.
That was really cool. I think it was kind of un-androidy the way he like fetishized that character.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that's like a very Ridley Scott thing, is to characterize or give the android more characterization than the actual humans, because he's always kind of making a statement about, well, you know, do we give androids a soul when we give them life? You know, is that sort of imbued in them? So I think that was kind of a little throwback. It reminded me of, because we had recently just seen Blade Runner.
Yes.
So that was kind of fresh in my head.
Yeah.
It just seemed really off. And so to answer the question, is this an Alien prequel? It isn't, because it's an origin story. And there is a difference because it's just setting up everything. It's setting up the backstory. And I found the backstory rather interesting, I will say, but the execution was just awful.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel about it. It's just that, like, when I go and watch the other Alien movies now, which I will plan on doing, it's like, okay, yeah, they came from us, sort of, not really, but they did. You know, it just kind of leads to this different path.
Well, let's talk about some of the positive things. I thought the world was pretty interesting.
I thought the CGI, the special effects, I mean, I feel like most blockbusters have to have that high level of effects to even be a blockbuster these days, because they're getting easier and easier to do. But I just thought it was beautiful, like when they showed the long shots of the planet, and I don't know where they shot, or if that was all purely constructed CGI. But I thought that was really well done. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
The Prometheus ship kind of reminded me of Firefly.
A little bit, yeah. It had
that?
It had sort of like the sort of outboard kind of thrusters sort of things.
Everything seemed familiar too, which I liked.
Yeah.
But again, everything was just convenient. Like, oh, we have this surgical machine that suddenly comes in handy. It's just like, okay, I know something's going to happen with this. And then, oh, like she knows exactly how to use it while she's freaking out, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I'm just on the negatives. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just like the buzzkill. But
Yeah.
it just, I did. I like the set design. Everything seemed very natural, even though convenient.
It seems like even though it's made 30 years after Alien, it could be in the same. It could be in the universe before that movie. So some of the computer technology was way beyond what they had in Alien. Because in Alien they were using like text based stuff
like DOS.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, that's just because of the time.
Yeah, but
because of where we are now and where we were in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, I thought that the visual I wasn't distracted by any single visual effect. I thought that was all executed very well. I thought the acting was great. I mean, I agree with you guys. I thought the acting was as good as it was going to get.
Yeah,
I don't think
that one line really drove me nuts, and that was when Charlize Theron was talking to the older dude, and she was like, "Father." It's like
talk about that old dude for a minute.
Yeah.
And there was that whole tension with, like when he was a hologram and he spoke to the crew and he said, well, David, he's like the son I never had. And then that's why Charlize's line, she calls him father. Yeah. That's like, oh, so she is his daughter, but he doesn't really accept that. And then you see those little tensions. Or how did you guys feel about that?
I mean, I like the idea that she was basically wanting her father out so that she could sort of develop her own plan, but that comes way too late. Yeah. Because I thought that she was married to him. I thought that was his like young wife.
Yeah, no, I kind of got that sense
But then
too.
since she's saying, then I started thinking about it. Okay, well, David, he probably treats David a lot better than he does his daughter because he invented him. Then she's just giving him attitude. That all finally that all finally came together towards the end, but for the longest time I thought, is that his wife?
Yeah. And I didn't like her character at all. I felt like she was just trying to be she played it a little over the top for me. I felt like it was too much. But now that you say that about her character, I understand it. But again, way too late for it to have any impact. The entire movie I basically made up my mind about her. Like, I don't like her. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, she has depth, but I don't care.
Right. Yeah, she has her own agenda, but it's just never fleshed out because she doesn't have anybody to speak to. And I think they could have easily done that with David because David could easily be programmed to just shut his mouth about whatever they're talking about corporation-wise. Let's talk about the absolutely over-the-top hokey, we're going to crash this thing into the other ship sequence. Which is completely unnecessary and honestly, completely like I don't imagine those guys ever doing that. Yeah, the two pilots and the captain.
Again,
the two pilots.
And here's the thing: I'm supposed to care a lot that these guys are giving up their lives for the human race. Yeah. I didn't care at all. Yeah, those guys had one line previous to that, and they had I don't know what their names were. They had no characterizations other than generic crew members. And Idris Elba was like, "All right, guys. You better go because I can't. I'm gonna have to do this alone." And they're like, "You need some help, Captain."
You're like, "You're the captain."
It was, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of a video game cutscene. Yeah. Where it was like, you're playing a multiplayer game and they have to make some excuse why these characters are still on the bridge, and it's like, "No, we'll stay here, Captain."
I've seen more convincing cutscenes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know the last time when I had my stomach stapled where I could just move around freely on another planet, just like nobody's business, and lift things over my head, and then zip line down to certain places, and run from a ship that is rolling at me like the giant Randy's Donuts.
She shot herself with a lot of stuff, though.
But probably Jason, didn't you see her wince like 3 times? I mean,
did.
Come on, she winced.
She did.
Several
she moaned
times.
and she grabbed her stomach a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, she gave herself an alien abortion. So.
That's true. That's true.
Well, so they did that. I mean, if you want to speak directly of a special effect that they did really well, once David is, what happens to him, I won't spoil that. I thought I'd like to see sort of how they executed that because obviously it required quite a bit of work.
Yeah,
but that
it looked really natural.
Yeah, but it didn't. It completely seemed natural and
really good.
it was pretty awesome.
I've seen some tech that can do that. It's fairly complex. It's a big setup to do that.
But yeah, I don't know. I can't really speak of a lot of the Alien movies have really good orchestral soundtracks.
Yeah.
I don't remember a single thing from this movie.
Yeah, no music that I remember.
Which there really wasn't a lot, which
Yeah.
I think I kind of appreciated because that's kind of how they are up until about the last 20 minutes, and then things get sort of crazy. But I just
there wasn't great music. Yeah, I agree. So I mean, bottom line for me, I thought the world was really interesting. I thought it was a great idea. I thought it was beautifully shot. It was filled with characters I could not care less about.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't care what happened to any of them. I didn't think they acted like human beings would.
Yeah.
And that's it. So, I sort of gauge like my enjoyment of a movie based on whether or not I would buy the DVD. I would watch this again. I don't know if I would pay to watch it again.
Right.
Like I might watch it on like Netflix Instant just to be like maybe revisit in 5 years. Because again, it gave me a lot of feelings like a little bit like 2001, especially that opening sequence where it was like David alone on the ship. Like that's so 2001.
Yeah. I love that
and
but
the
it's
original
just wasted though.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
But again, it gives us the only character points of the entire movie. So that's the only reason. If without that sequence, I don't know anything about David. And I don't know anything about the rest of the characters.
I would be really interested to see how much stuff was left out, if anything, or if there's just some way of retooling this to become something better. Because I would want it, because Ridley Scott always does really great commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So and then
good director's cuts.
And the director cuts obviously is good. And at the same time, all the special features on all the stuff that he's ever done is really solid. So the only reason why I ever see myself buying this, because I wouldn't buy it for the movie, is I would buy it for the extra stuff just to get answers.
Yeah. Well, and if that extra 30 minutes that's rumored is all in the first hour and it's all character setup stuff, that could go a long way to helping me understand, like, why did this guy think that landing on the planet 10 minutes later you leave the ship?
Sure.
Like,
I'd say if you generally like the sci-fi genre, or if you like Alien or Aliens, I'd say go see it just to have your own opinion, because I have a lot of friends who like the franchise and loved the movie,
Yeah.
Some people do. So
Yeah.
I'd say go see it. For the diehards, I think it might be a little disappointing, but
Yeah.
I'd say go see it if you like sci-fi.
All right. Well, I think maybe we should get out of here before we
Bash it anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so
Prometheus.
If we're not back next week, there's a reason.
yes, we got hit by the Prometheus mob. They sent an alien, a huge face hugger, after us.
No, it's just a vase with flowers.
That's right. Just a vase.
gosh.
Yeah.
Black goo.
Black goo.
If you see any black goo, watch out. All right. So let's get out of here. Chelsey, thanks again so much for coming by.
Of course. I love coming.
Yes.
Very fun.
Yes. So we'll get out of here. And thanks again to Sarah. By the way, Sarah, back there, thumbs up, thumbs down. What did you think of Prometheus? Thumbs down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thumbs down,
It's a
sad
consensus.
face.
Yes.
Aw.
All right. So thank you again to Sarah, our production assistant, for helping us out. And we'll get out of here. Thanks for listening. I'm Andy.
I'm Jason.
This has been, and always will be, A Place for Film. A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.